Hello again, everyone. This is the Observer Reporter High School Football Preview Show, sponsored by Cohen Tire Company in Washington. I am Sports Editor Chris Dugan. With me this week, again, Assistant Sports Editor Joe Tuscano and the OR's high school beat writer Luke Campbell. Guys, there are 17 games on the high school schedule this week, 16 on Friday night, 1 on Saturday, and there has to be closer games than what we saw last week. Luke, 17 games also last week, and the average margin of victory was about 120 or
31, pretty close.
31. Not very many competitive games last week. We had 10 teams that went into the weekend undefeated. 7 came out undefeated. We lost 3. Carmichael's lost to Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, and the 2 local Class 6A teams, Peters Township and Canon-McMillan, also suffered their first losses. Now, out of those 7 teams that won and remained undefeated, only 1 played a game that was decided by less than 30 points. That was Beth-Center winning by 13 at Fraser. The other 6 teams, 2 of them put up 60 points, Joe, in the first half. That was Washington and California.
Yeah, not very competitive, and you know, you just have to look at it and say it was a mismatch, and that's all you can really say. These are the kind of games that the coaches don't particularly like to play because they don't get a lot of time for their starters. But these are the games that the reserves just love because they know they're going to be playing a lot.
Well, last week there were a lot of reserves playing, especially for those undefeated teams. You throw out Beth-Center, the other 6 teams, Belle Vernon, South Fayette, Washington, Burgettstown, West Greene, and California. Those teams won by an average of 47.5 points last week. 2, as we said, had at least 61 points in the first half. Now, one game this week that is very interesting. It's a game on Saturday at Graham Field in Wilkinsburg. It matches undefeated California against undefeated Amani Christian. And they better check the light bulbs in the scoreboard at Graham Field just to make sure that they're still working, because you have California that's averaging 67 points per game. Amani Christian is averaging 62 points per game.
Yeah, I mean, California has scored 202 points in their 3 games this year. That's the highest in all classifications in the WPIAL, from 1A to 6A. Amani Christian, 186, they're second. No other team in the WPIAL has more than 150 points this year. So these offenses know how to light it up, and they do it in different ways too. California, they use the rushing attack, they use the wing T offense. Amani Christian's going to spread it out. They're going to throw it a lot. So we might see a shootout on Saturday, that's for sure.
Listen to some of these offensive numbers with California and Amani Christian. Start with California. Jelani Stafford, the 260-pound fullback, who's a person who saw him play this year, described him this morning to me as Christian Okoye. Do you remember him that played for the Kansas City Chiefs? Guys just hang off of him as they're trying to tackle him. But anyway, Stafford is averaging 10.2 yards per carry. He has 32 rushing attempts this year. 9 of them have gone for touchdowns. California's ground game, it's kind of like a spread option, double slot type thing, which you would see from the Navy offense in college football. Cal's averaging 393 rushing yards a game, 8.5 yards a carry. Wow. They've only thrown 8 passes this year. But when you can average 8.5 yards a carry, you don't have to throw the ball very often. Now, on the other side of the coin, you have Amani Christian. Running back Asante Watkins, he's over 400 yards for the season. He averages more than 10 yards a carry, actually 13.0. 13 a clip. They have a wide receiver, Sam Fairley, has 15 catches this year, 7 that have gone for touchdowns. That's a pretty good ratio. Averages 25 yards a catch. Their quarterback, Tawan Wesley, threw for 412 yards last week in a 66-6 win over Riverview. That's a pretty good day. 412 yards, 6 touchdowns. So if you can force a punt in that game, you have a real good chance to win, I would think.
If you can force a punt, you definitely have a good chance. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier was that they really haven't seen really too tough of competition.
Both teams.
Yes, from Amani Christian, that none of their teams really stood out. And then California, they played Avella, which obviously the 86 points was definitely one of their best offensive days for sure. And then Fort Cherry, but that's not a Fort Cherry team that was anything close to what it was last year. And then their first game was against Brownsville. So really, this is kind of the first test on both teams' schedule for one another.
Now, talking about first, we have a local team that's playing its first home game all year. Trinity. The Hillers are finally going to play at Hiller Field. And Trinity will be hosting Laurel Highlands in a Big 9 conference game. That's a big game. Trinity is 0-2. Both games are conference games, but they played on the road at Thomas Jefferson and West Mifflin, the two teams that everybody had pegged to finish 1-2 in the conference. Some people did have Bell Vernon in there, but let's go with TJ and West Mifflin. And for the first 6 quarters in those games, Trinity was only outscored by 9 points in those 2 games. Now, they had a rough second half against TJ, but I think Trinity proved that if they stay healthy, they're going to be tough to beat the rest of the season.
We talked about depth a couple of weeks ago when I believe they had 33 players.
They had 33 players dressed for the first scrimmage against Moon.
Right. And we talked about not getting worn down, and I think that's going to be their problem. You look at the second half of their games, and against Thomas Jefferson, they got handled pretty easily. But when they're fresh, and I'm guessing here with only 33 varsity players, if that number's still up there, that the depth takes effect in the second half when you get tired, when you can't replace somebody with another player because he might be a freshman not ready to play yet, whereas a team like Thomas Jefferson probably are too deep at every position. So that's something that I think they have to battle probably the whole year. And I don't know what you do with only 33 kids on your roster.
Try to shorten games, I guess.
If you can, run the ball
and shorten the games. Now, Trinity gets its first home game of the season this weekend, but Peters Township's already played 3 home games. The Indians lost last week, 3rd home game of the season. They lost to undefeated Bethel Park. This week, Peters Township will be playing at Altoona, the longest road trip that any local team will be facing this year.
Yeah, they're leaving Thursday, I believe, and that is a long trip, and I'm sure that it affects you. But as long as Cortez is throwing the ball well, I think they have a chance to win this game.
Yeah, I really think if Peters is going to make the playoffs this year, this is a game they must win at Altoona. Now, another game in that Class 6A Southeastern Conference will be played right here in Cannonsburg. Canon-McMillan will be hosting Mount Lebanon. Both teams coming into the game at 2-1, 1-0 in the conference. And we had a chance a little earlier to talk to Mike Evans, the head coach at Canon-McMillan, about the Big Macs game against the Blue Devils. We're here with Canon-McMillan head football coach Mike Evans. The Big Macs are off to a pretty good start this season. They're 2-1 overall, 1-0 in the Southeastern Conference. That's a 6A conference. Big Macs have a game at home this weekend against Mount Lebanon. Mike, they're the team that everybody had picked to win the conference this year. So this is probably a good barometer of where the program is at Canon-McMillan.
I mean, it would be. I mean, my first game ever at Canon-McMillan was against Mount Lebanon. Home game, almost 3 years ago. We came out, I still remember it was a 10-7 game in the 3rd quarter before things got out of hand. So last year we hung with them. They're a very well-coached football team. We feel we're going into every game trying to win, and we feel that we have just as good a chance of winning this game as any game we go into play, and we feel very strongly about our program. With all the respect in the world for Mount Lebanon and what they've done, it's a great program, but we're just glad that we have a chance on Friday night to play a team like this.
Now, Mike, your kids have kind of earned the tag cardiac kids. First game of the season at Kiski, they score a touchdown less than 2 minutes to go in the game to win. The next week they play Hempfield here. They score with less than a minute to go to win the game. Touchdown in both of those games in the 2-minute drill, I guess. In past years, would Canon-McMillan have been able to come from behind and win those games?
I mean, that's what
the mentality changed a little bit.
You like to think it has. I mean, you leave those games, and as a coach, you're upset that it came down to that. I mean, at the same time, you're excited that your kids rose to the occasion. And people say, "Hey, Mike, the mentality has changed here. There's a culture being born, and the kids expect to win now, and that's outstanding. But you look at the game film and you say, look, it shouldn't have come down to this. It shouldn't have came down to this, and it shouldn't have came down to this. But I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think, like I said, the kids, we don't look at logos anymore. We don't look at helmets. We don't look at who the other team is. We worry about us. I don't know if I can tell you what my schedule is. I mean, we worry about what we can do every week to be better. And whoever shows up on Friday and comes out of that tunnel over there, we'll be ready for. That's the way we look at it. And but no, they definitely have a competitive, you know, we talk about believing in us and competing, and that's what we're doing. I think that lends to coming back in games like that, never losing faith that you can come back. And I mean, the Kiski game was a mess. I mean, we had 86 yards of offense. How do you win? It's the worst offensive performance I've ever been a part of, and I'm the offensive coordinator, so it's mine. I mean, I got to own it. I mean, but you find a way, and I mean, you know, thank God our kids came out and performed that last drive and did some nice things to come back. But yeah, I mean, they're cardiac for a lot of reasons. They give me a lot of heart attacks there. I mean, you know, I mean, I don't think those games have to come down to that, but hey.
Well, they keep the people in the stands. That's a good thing. Mike, this week against Mount Lebanon, it's kind of a unique situation. Mount Lebanon actually has two quarterbacks. Their starter from last year was hurt, didn't play the first two games, and they put a backup in by the name of Seth Morgan, and all he's doing is leading the WPIAL in passing. They have a wide receiver named Aiden Kane. He caught a state record 27 passes in a game against Pine Richland. How do you slow down a passing game like that?
I don't know. We're going to give it a shot. They have some pretty good players over there. I think they're one corner. I think he's the fastest kid in the WPIL in the 200 or something like that. You know, you can get caught up in looking at all that stuff. And right now we're going to look at, here's their set. Here's how we're going to attack it. Here's what we're going to do. They have two good quarterbacks. You know, you can't even notice the difference between the two that much. I mean, number 17, number 7. You know, the number 1, the Kane kid, he can run by you. He does a lot of things. I mean, obviously you catch 25 or 26 or 27 balls in a game, you're doing a variety of things, and you know, they hide him and move him around. They do a very good job. When I say, listen, everybody will tell you their team's well coached when they're about to go into them. I'm telling you, this is a very well coached team. They've got their stuff together over there, and we know that we're going to have to be, you know, as prepared as we can be to play a team that's as coached as well as they are. Plus, you know, they've got a lot of marquee players. They've got half dozen, 6, 7, 8 guys that are all college football bound. I mean, they've got some good players over there, a good tradition, and Coach Melnick does a great job.
Mike, tell me a little bit. We all know about your fourth quarter successes pulling out games in the last minute, but you've also had some third quarter struggles. I mean, you guys haven't scored a point in the third quarter.
Outscored 31-0.
Outscored 31-0. So tell me a little bit about how you improve upon that. What's kind of stressed in the locker room, whether it be at halftime of regular season games or in practice every day?
There's a few things we've thought about. I mean, we've thought about putting our kids in the locker room halfway through practice and bringing them back out. I don't know if that'll work or not, but you know, we're winning. We're winning we have the advantage in scoring in every quarter except for the third. We're coming out of the locker room a little bit flat. We've got to fix that. I mean, you know, you could say, I mean, hey, maybe they're making adjustments we're not seeing. Maybe we're over adjusting, or maybe we're just coming out flat. I'm not 100% sure what the answer is. You know, we come out, I think maybe I come out throwing a little bit too much. We seem to turn the ball over a lot in the third quarter. I don't know if that's lends itself to play calling or not. I mean, I think that we just don't come out ready to play. We got to do a better job coming out of the locker room. We haven't come out of a game yet, or out of a halftime yet where the game was not winnable. I mean, we've got to come out of that thing, come out of the halftime locker room excited and ready to play football, and that's on us. We got to do a better job. I mean, we've been late out of the locker room a couple times. I mean, I know we barely made it out the one game, but we just got to do a better job. I'll tell you right now, we've had some road troubles. We barely got to Kiski on time to play the game. I didn't know it was going to take 2 hours to get there. I mean, so I've screwed some things up. We got to get some of this, you know, some of this stuff nailed down and do a better job. Those intangibles matter. Mike,
I wanted to ask you one thing about the number of people in the program. You know, over the years, Canon-McMillan football has been having low numbers in the wins total and in the number of people in the program. The wins total starting to turn around, but also the number of kids in the program. Tell me a little bit about how many kids you actually have playing football at Canon-McMillan? How many are in the program top to bottom?
I mean, number one job was to try to get our numbers up all the way down through kindergarten. Right now, we have 84 kids 9 through 12 playing football here. We have 36 or 37 playing 8th grade football. We have 30 playing 7th grade football. And I mean, I'll even go down to directly 5th and 6th. My son actually plays directly football here. We have 5th and 6th grade. We had to split into 2 teams this year because we had 46 kids in each one of those in leagues. So we split into 2 teams of 23 for the first time in 3 years. So we're looking at until about 2022. I mean, we feel like we got some numbers, and if we can just continue to improve, I don't know where we're going, how fast we're going to get there, okay? But all we want is the arrow to keep pointing up. We just want to keep moving that way. Like, you look at next year, we have 10 seniors on this team. The year before I got here, the freshman class was decimated. We have 10 seniors. We have 36 to 40 kids playing 8th grade football. If that actually comes to fruition, you're talking about 110, 112 kids out here. And we play a varsity game, a JVA game, and a JVB game. 2 JV games. Yeah, we play 2 JV games. And the idea is we got rid of freshman football, not because of numbers. We have 27 freshmen. We got rid of freshman football as I couldn't find guys to coach it. So we actually added a few varsity coaches because, I mean, this school district's on board. And what we did was we pulled everybody up and we coach every player. The varsity staff coaches every player.
I think the equipment manager is going to be asking for a raise after all these players are showing up. Mike, who are some of the guys that have had pretty good 3-game periods for you already?
I would say you'd probably look number 1 at Drew Angle. Drew Angle, number 10. He's a kid that he plays wide receiver and safety for us. He's got a pick. He had 7 picks as a sophomore last year. He's a guy. I mean, it's just like Lebo. They're not going to hide the fact that they like to go to Aiden Kane. I think it's obvious. When you watched our tape, we like to go to number 21 Graydon Picnic and number 10 Drew Angle, and he's made some big plays for us. He's had 4 or 5 catches a game. Had the winner against Kiski, and had some nice catches and nice plays against Penn Hills. Can block, can run the ball, can do some things. To be honest with you, I should be doing more to get him the football. As far as Graydon Picnic's another 2-way player, good safety, has a pick on the season, has a few has some nice statistics with the receiving. Caught the game winner against Hempfield. These are good kids. I really like our junior core. We have another senior, Aaron Smith, a lineman that's playing center, was an all-league 20-game starter or tackle. We moved him to center because, I think you need a guy that has some football intelligence and experience there, and we didn't have it. So we moved him inside. He's performed well, and we have the Sacco kid running the ball and playing linebacker, and we have the young quarterback, Trey Lewis, who's he's been up and down, but that's he's a sophomore. We have Jonathan Quinque behind him, who's gotten some playing time. That this quarterback thing is not settled from week to week. We look at both of those guys with a lot of respect. So, that's pretty much who's been playing for us. The young offensive line's been getting better week to week. Young defensive line, they're the same players. I mean, they've been getting better week to week. We like our secondary, and hey, we're just out here trying to get better every day, and we'll see how it goes.
You mentioned not looking at the colors, not looking at who you're playing, and not knowing your schedule. But it's hard to kind of ignore a game like this with this magnitude this early. How do you kind of keep it level-headed throughout practice? Because obviously the kids know how big of a game this is for playoff implications.
I think early in the week you say, look, it's going to be a big game. There's going to be a lot of things here that haven't been around Canon-Mac in a long time. I've been through this at Saginaw Valley and at California University. When I was at first at California University, we couldn't win a game, and all of a sudden ESPN's doing games from our stadium during the playoffs, and your kids just have, we call it the noise. And there's a lot of good noise too. It's the noise, it's all the bad things and the good things. Like right now, when I first got here, they were, I can't believe you played for that football team. I can't believe all kind of stuff. Now the noise is, I have, some of these kids are getting tweeted by all these different guys and all these different handlers, and hey, that's all great. They want to go ahead and be positive. That's great. Thank them and ignore them. All right. The noise is something that we talk about all the time, and it's good and it's bad. Like right now, they should be excited that they're getting that they're getting noticed. But at the same time, you got to keep your focus on the game. All this stuff goes away, the second that you lose football games. This is something that happens when you win and you're starting to turn. And everybody wants to say, hey, you know what? I mean, 7-8 win season, 9-win season's on the table. Well, so is a 2-8 win season, a 2-8 season. It's still on the table too. We got to work hard every single day, and just ignore all these other things, and just whether they're positive or negative, and just play football and focus on the task at hand through pain, fatigue, and adversity. It's mental toughness we talk about all the time. Sorry, I pitched that to you right there. That's
okay.
I'm a little bit of a push the button and I just go.
Mike, we thank you for your time and good luck Friday night. Canon-McMillan will be hosting Mount Lebanon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
There are some other interesting games this weekend. As we said earlier, this is a much better schedule than what we had last weekend. And some of the more interesting games can be found involving Class 2A teams. One of them is a non-conference game. Wash High is unbeaten. Be playing 2-0 South Park at Wash High Stadium. That's a non-conference game. South Park is a AAA school that had a big win last week in the Interstate Conference, defeated Mount Pleasant. Joe, if Wash High wins this game, you realistically have to think that the Prexies will be undefeated going into the last 2 weeks of the season when they play on the road at Burgettstown and then at Beth-Center.
Right, and they've already won 31 consecutive conference games. You're looking for number 32.
Well, this is a non-conference game.
Right. Last week they beat Brownsville 68-7. And
they put up 60-plus points in the first half,
and really didn't get a chance to play their kids a lot, their starters a lot. And in the 2 games that they've played now, they've outscored teams 104-15. So this is going to be their first real test in South Park.
South Park is a team that has a dual-threaded quarterback. Damon Smith rushed for 136 yards, passed for 149 last week when they beat Mount Pleasant 14-9, and that really put South Park in the driver's seat in the Interstate Conference. That game, by the way, was a home game for South Park, but they didn't get to play at South Park. They're renovating the stadium there. They had to play the game at Dormont Stadium.
Oh.
So South Park will be on the road at Wash High. A couple other games in the Interstate Conference this week. One of them is Bentworth. Remember, Bentworth got blown out in the opener by West Greene. Suddenly, Bentworth is 2-0 in the conference and hosting undefeated Burgettstown this weekend.
Bentworth gets another opportunity here against a quality opponent in Burgettstown. Burgettstown is looking to win for 3 games in a row for the first time since 2011, and they haven't won 4 in a row in this century. So that tells you how the program has struggled a little bit.
Yeah, Ryan Launder, the quarterback at Burgettstown, is a pretty good player. He can score as a kick returner. He's a good defensive player, good runner, thrower. He completed 4 passes last week. All 4 went for touchdowns. And
this is the first year as a quarterback. I mean, last year he was a receiver for this team, but Burgettstown's really been able to do it defensively. That's how they've been able to separate itself from the 2 opponents so far, only giving up 6 points to Fraser and then shutting out Bishop Canavan last week. So that's really how they've been able to do it. And it's not just holding other teams off the scoreboard playing defense, it's scoring on defense. They've returned, whether it be an interception for a touchdown, fumble recoveries for touchdowns. I mean, their defense has been able to score and help that offense out a little bit, especially in Lounder's first year, kind of being the signal caller back there.
Beth-Center is another team that's unbeaten in the Interstate Conference. The Bulldogs have a non-conference game this week. They're playing Springdale. Charleroi, a team that's still in the hunt in the conference. Charleroi will be hosting Southmoreland this weekend.
Yeah, Beth-Center, the last time they won 4 games in a row, they enter this game 3-0, was back in 2014 when they went undefeated in the regular season, and then were upset in the first round of the playoffs by Riverside 21-20. But you have to say that of all the undefeated teams that we have right now, that they have to be probably maybe the most surprising. And as long as they keep running Dominic Fundy, who I think is one of the top players in our area, they have a chance to win.
Another surprising team at 3-0 is West Greene in the Tri-County South. West Greene won 42-12 at Mapletown last weekend. Luke, you were there. What were your impressions of the Pioneers?
What was really impressive is we hear about Ben Jackson all the time, and it's the Ben Jackson show down at West Greene.
He's their tailback.
But Zach Pettit was as multi-dimensional of a quarterback as you're going to be able to see. 11 carries, 192 yards. He totaled 5 touchdowns in that game. I mean, he really set the pace for them offensively. It started out kind of back and forth. It seemed like a feeling out process for both teams. West Greene was spreading the ball out, getting it to a bunch of different guys when Mapletown was being Mapletown and giving Dylan Rush the ball after he set Dylan Bachna's record for both yardage and touchdowns, both school records there. But it was really a feeling out process at first, but then it was basically down to Pettit to take that game over, and he did that not only on the ground with his 192 yards, but passing the ball as well with 3 more touchdowns.
Now, West Greene will be at home in Rogersville this weekend. Friday night they play Carmichael's in what is really a really big game in the Tri-County South Conference. Carmichael's lost to Our Lady of Sacred Heart in a non-conference game last week, but that's nothing new. Carmichael's lost to Olsh last year in a non-conference game, then went on to win the Tri-County South.
And what's funny is I talked to Zach Pettit after the game, and Carmichael's has been the prime of that conference for a long time, and he told me, Zach Pettit, the quarterback from West Greene, that they don't know how to feel. They're not used to this kind of feeling. They're almost 1 win away from getting a playoff spot right now, and that's something that the school hasn't done since 1993. So this is new for them, and Carmichael's is they've had West Greene's number all these years, and now this is setting up for a big game in single A.
Yeah, if West Greene would win this game, could set them up for a long run where they could be undefeated going into the last game of the regular season against California, which could also be undefeated, or at least undefeated in the conference. So that's a big game. One other thing I wanted to mention. Only 3 teams are undefeated in conference play in the 3A Interstate Conference. One of those is McGuffey. And the Highlanders have a big game this weekend, Friday night at Mount Pleasant. They could hand Mount Pleasant a second loss in conference play.
Last week we did the question over/under on Dylan Rush's carries. Maybe we should have this week the over/under on the first time out from Ed Dalton.
First minute, second minute. If McGuffey plays as well as it did last week, maybe Ed won't call one in the first quarter.
Well, Marshall Whipke playing pretty well for them. It seems like they're settling in nicely. He's settling in nicely at quarterback in their running game. They have 2 good running backs. So, if he's able to run the ball, get a lead, they have a good chance to win the game. It's when they fall behind, then they've got trouble. They don't want to have to be passing the ball over. That's just not Ed Dalton's offense.
Well, this is a good opportunity for McGuffey to put Mount Pleasant, which has been the kingpin of the Interstate Conference, 2 games behind them in the loss column. That does it for this week's Observer Reporter High School Football Preview Show, sponsored by Cohen Tire Company of Washington. Join us next week and we'll review what happened this weekend. It should be a good weekend, and we'll also look ahead to next weekend's games.